Namaskar everyone, this is your host Srishti Prabha, the managing editor of India Currents, and we're hoping for my co-host Yashu Rao to join soon. Here she is, let me add her.
Oh, hey, Yashu, no technical difficulties this time. Hey,
Wow!
hey!
What? Oh my gosh!
That's
Hey
amazing.
everyone!
Hey, so as I was saying, I am Srishti Prabha, the managing editor at India Currents, and this is my co-host.
Hey everyone, it's your girl, Happy Yashu, founder and CEO of hashtag Happy Yashu and Air Studios Entertainment Productions. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am clearly, as you can see, back at my crib, okay? So maybe that's why Instagram was like, all right, I'm okay with you like being here today. So anyhow, thank you all so much for tapping in today. How was your week, Srishti?
My week's been good, just there's so much to report on at all times that I'm a little bit overwhelmed with information at times, but the greatest part of doing Daisy Talk is one that I get to take a step back and do something kind of different. I get to talk to you, which is really nice because I don't talk to people during the day usually. But also, it's always nice to see you, Yeshu. And then the third is that we get to do these interviews with people that are so like not only knowledgeable in what they're doing, but also very accomplished and also offer, just external knowledge about the world that you might not know. And today, the interview that we'll be having, I feel, is very much along those lines. And that said, I want to give a trigger warning. It pinned in our comment. We might be talking about some sensitive topics like female genital mutilation and cutting. And it's because the person that we have coming on is the author of a book called Seven, which deals with these kind of heavy topics. So if you are somebody that has experienced this or knows someone that's experienced FGM and are, a little sensitive to the topic, please definitely turn off this live. This one's not for you. But you can always recommend the live to people who might not know that much about this. And I want to say both Yeshu and I are actually not very well versed in this topic ourselves. So this is a learning experience for both of us. And please forgive us if we, you know, say something that might not be kosher. I'm not sure if that'll happen, but just putting it out there. This is kind of a new-ish topic for us, but I think it's a very important one. And so we're very lucky to have our guest for today. So yeah, I don't know, Yeshu, do you have any things you want to say? I know you're going through, like you were also saying, it's like kind of a heavy topic for you. So want to make sure you're cool with it.
I'm honestly, as heavy as this topic may be, this is educational. This is how people will become aware of some really harsh realities that are happening in this world. And I am truly honored and so amazed by our guest speaker, Farzana Doctor, who will be coming on shortly. And she just commented, not such a scary topic, absolutely. And that's what we want to do, right? Possibly be able to educate us on things where we're learning that, okay, this may not be as scary as we might make it to be, right? This might be something very common even in certain practices or cultures or backgrounds, right? But with that being said, this platform, India Currents, I was just telling Srishti, has opened so many doors for me when it came to like my thinking. It has broadened my perspective and view of the world and allowed me to see things that I never really even knew or like acknowledged, right? So I'm excited. I am so excited. And I know Farzana Doctor is always tapping into our lives. She always comes in with great insight. And she's quite familiar with India Currents family. So I'm super excited, honestly.
Yeah. So with that, let me just introduce our guest. So, Farzana Doctor is a Toronto-based author of 4 novels, Stealing Nasreen, 6 Meters of Pavement, All Inclusive, and Seven. Seven was chosen for many 2020 Best Book lists and shortlisted for the Trillium and Evergreen Awards. Her poetry collection, You Still Look the Same, will be released in May 2022, sorry. Farzana is also the Mossy behind Dear Mossy, a new sex and relationships column for FGMC survivors. She's also an activist and a part-time psychotherapist. Find her at Farzana Doctor on Twitter and Instagram. So with that, let me bring her on.
I'm excited.
But she's prolific. She has 4 books, and also she's coming out with a poetry book. So this is great. Hi.
Hello. Nice to see
Wow.
you.
Wonderful to finally meet you after all this time.
Yeah, I have been watching your lives for a while, and we've also communicated over email because India Kearns did a review of Seven. So it's lovely to meet you both.
Yes,
Thank you so much for being here today with us. And I absolutely am excited for today's episode. And I think it's going to be great for our viewers as well to discuss about, you know, what's happening with this new book and what it's all about. As well as, you know, if you want to also talk to us a little bit about some of your other, you know, works as well, I think that would also be really amazing.
Yeah, I think just before you begin, the one thing that I loved, because I was the one who kind of got the review for Seven, was just that it was such a specific niche topic, and the way that you did it was like actually readable, which is it's a difficult thing to do, to make something so, even, you know, like traumatic and like things that people have gone through that are like so sensitive, and make them not only like resonate with people but also like educational. And I loved the review that also Jean wrote for you. She wrote a great review that like kind of gave me more insight into like what your work was, and with the specific Bohra community as well. So I don't know where you want to start. If you want to start with who you are and what you're doing, that could be good too.
Sure, yeah. So besides writing novels, I also write poetry, and in the afternoons, I'm also a psychotherapist. I've been an activist with a group called We Speak Out since 2015, and I also do some volunteer work with another group called Sayo, and both of those groups are working within the Dawoodi Bohra community to end the practice of khatna, and that's one of the issues that is in the book. So in our community, we call khatna, or cubs, is female genital cutting, and it's type 1 female genital cutting, which involves cutting the clitoral hood. It's considered to be one of the least worst forms of FGM, but it's traumatic and it's dangerous and it's harmful and all of that kind of stuff. And I really wanted, well, I didn't want to, this book kind of came to me in the midst of my activist work and in the midst of my own healing work as well. This book kind of came to me in a very organic way. I found myself writing these like fully fictional scenes, like fully formed scenes onto the page. And then after writing about 20 of them, I realized, oh, I think I'm writing a novel. And I'm writing a novel about this kind of difficult subject, but that was important to me because it is so taboo and it makes us all queasy. And so how was I going to address the subject in a way that was going to be an enjoyable novel to read? And with all of the novels that I've written, I try to bring in important social justice issues in a way that is paced well, that has lots of funny bits, that has lots of sex, that is just enjoyable, that is like, has good plot, right? So, so this is a story about a 40-year-old woman who goes to India on a marriage-saving trip. There are some problems in her marriage. When she goes on her trip, she thinks she's going to be doing some research about an ancestor in her family. But then, you know, she's there in 2016 where all the debates around khatna are just like really big in the community. And that's based on real life, that it really was. It started to brew in 2015, 2016. And so she realizes that she's got to figure out where she has to position herself in this issue and also deal with how it's impacting her. Yeah.
Do you have any personal relationship to this specific, because you're doing all this activism work? Are you also from the Bora community, or?
Yeah, I was born into the Bora community. My father has really distanced himself from the religion, and my mother was lukewarm to the religion. So I grew up in a very kind of questioning household when it came to religion. But my extended family, there are some people who are, quite observant of the religion, and the full spectrum, like happens in most families, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah. And I'm also a survivor of Khatna, and that's what got me probably involved in the activism, and made me want to write a book to kind of break some silence around this. And I really hope that it ends up having some kind of impact. And this used to be a subject that was so difficult to broach, because it's a difficult subject. But since writing the novel, and it came out a year ago, I've been invited to do a lot of talks like these, and it's given me the opportunity to give people kind of a global context about this issue, which is really important to me. And I can get into that if you're interested in kind of the larger
Of
issue.
course, yeah. I think like the South Asian community in general is pretty mum on most things that are kind of a little bit more painful to talk about. So I definitely think having what is a fictional book based off of real things makes it so much easier to have a conversation, because it doesn't feel personal, right? Like you're like, oh, this thing I know exists and I know is happening, and it's not about me, but here are, like you can have that conversation without it like impacting like your your parents or your grandparents or like people in your community. But just for context, just because not everyone on this live might know who or what the Bora community is, I just feel like you should just share a little bit of knowledge on that.
Sure, yeah. So Dawoodi Bohras are a very smallish, insular subsect of Shia Muslims based in India, but with communities worldwide, including in the US, large communities, as well in Canada, where I am. So insular in the sense that we have this religious head who kind of governs a lot of everyday life. And one of the issues in our community is that there can be social shunning when people question, disagree, or don't follow the rules. And so that makes it very difficult to talk about issues like this, and many, many issues in the community. It's also a very well-educated community. It's thought to have a lot of equality between genders. But if there's female genital cutting, we have to question that somewhat. It's also, this community has come under fire because there have been cases where people have been prosecuted in the US and in Australia for taking their daughters. Daughters have ended up, telling social workers or telling somebody, and then people have been prosecuted. And our religious leader promotes this practice. He tells people to do it discreetly, but he tells people it's required. And he's well loved, and so people will just say, okay, I guess it's harmless, and he's saying we should do it, so we should continue. But over the last 5 or 6 years, our activist groups have done a lot of work in terms of educating people and letting them know that it's not harmless. It causes, psychological, physical, sexual harm. And we've now done research, a couple of really big surveys in the last few years to get at some of the issues that women are facing. And that's part of why I created the Dear Masi column with Sayo, because I wanted to have a sex and relationships column where, people could ask questions about sex, because we don't talk about sex either, right? We're so about sex.
That's the crazy thing, right? Is that so I was gonna ask, and you can obviously answer it, but the reasoning for the FGM at the age of 7, like what is like the specific reason for it? And then like, of course, the after effects of that are like your sexual health definitely is suffering, and then you can't really talk to anyone about it, which is just such a crazy thing to think about, that like that the aftermath of it is basically something you can never have a conversation with someone in your community about. So yeah, can you just give a little bit of insight
Yeah,
into
so
that?
across the planet, the number one reason for doing some form of female genital cutting is to control sexuality, as though female
Hmm.
sexuality needs to be controlled. Of
Be
course, it
controlled, yeah.
doesn't, but across the globe. And it's important for people to understand that this happens in 92 countries across the world, including in the US and Canada. Until the late 70s, it was even covered by health insurance plans in the US, which means that
Whoa.
white Christian women were also victims of this. So there are
Mm.
probably many white Christian women who are around my age, I'm 50 and older, who have been subjected to this practice. And we've been hearing from people like, it used to be the myth was that it was happening only to women in Africa. And of course it happens there, but it crosses all of Asia. We're hearing from people in South America, in Australia. And so
Mhm.
like, I think what's happening is we're having a Me Too moment for FGM. And that's really fantastic, right? If we can have more and more people speaking up and saying, yeah, our community does this too. Yeah, our community wants to control our sexuality in this way too. And then we get to see that it's just part of a larger culture of patriarchy,
Mhm.
of controlling
Mhm.
sexuality.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at. The fact that, at 7, to think that you're controlling any type of sexuality, I feel like you're imposing that on a child to begin with. But then after that, it's like, let's just never talk about the fact that you're a woman until we have to get you married. And there's so many practices similar to that, even like, not, yeah. Anyways, there are other practices that are so similar to that. So it is good
Yeah.
to find unity in that voice.
So
Um,
many practices that are about controlling sexuality. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, Yashu, do you have any questions? We could ask you more about you. I want to know more about you. So I know you've written other novels. This will be my last question. Yashu, you can ask the next one. So let's hear about you. Like, what are your other novels about? What is your activism? You were saying you have a social activism element in each of them. And so what are they? And
Mhm.
what are you trying to like convey to the world with your message?
I think it's been different messages for different books. Books are almost like doing um, kind of like a PhD in each subject. You
Yeah.
get and you get really obsessed and you get deep, and then you write the book and then you let it go. But all of my books have South Asian characters. All of them have people from the Bora community. I also have lots of queer characters. I like to write about sexuality. So it's all sort of contemporary literary fiction. My first book addressed the queer community as well as the issues of new immigrants who come to the country with all kinds of professional qualifications and then end up being underemployed. My second novel is about a Bora man who forgot his baby in the backseat of his car, and there was a hot car death, and it's all about his
Mm,
healing and redemption and that from that tragedy. The third
wow.
novel is called that's 6 meters of pavement. The first novel is Stealing the Serene. Second is 6 meters of pavement. The third novel is called All Inclusive, and it takes up issues about all-inclusive resorts and some of the inequities that happen in those
Mm,
places. Plus, the Air India bombing also has a prominent role in that book. It doesn't sound like the two things should go together, but they end up coming together. And then,
wow.
of course, this book is about a bunch of things. It's about female genital cutting in the Bora community, but it's also about like relationships and women's relationships and how complicated families can be and marriage and all of that. So
Hmm.
each book is about something a little bit different because you need to do different things with each novel.
I'm truly just so like you're amazing, Farzana Doctor. Like just because not many people write about sensitive topics, but for you to beautifully kind of convey very important messages through your art is I just think it's so amazing. Like you're not just like talking about the subject matter, in like a scientific or way, but you're making it profound by giving like just a book about like having a kid locked in a car, like these are things that happen. These are subjects that people relate to. These are tragic events which are heavy,
Yes.
but they are very real.
And
And
and the books
I'm
are also funny. Like I don't know how to explain how you can have a hot car death and also have lots of funny bits, but I think we need to be able to write real stories in a way that's also real in terms of, the full spectrum of experience in life, including the really silly, stupid, funny,
Mhm.
wonderful things that happen all around those hard things.
yeah. Have you always
Definitely.
been into writing? Like, was this a passion that you did you know, like, I'm going to be an author, like this is my life ambition kind of thing, or
When I was a little kid, I was a very creative kid. I used to write plays and I wrote poetry. But, is the common thing that happens when you're a child of immigrants is that, issues like security and, having an income that will be stable is really important to parents, right? So I
Hmm.
was really encouraged and pressured to have some kind of career that would be more stable. And so the writing became kind of something really on the side. I
What
continued.
was the stable job?
Okay, so, well, I was supposed to go to medical school, but I just didn't want to do that. So I ended up going into social work. I got a master's in social work. And so over the years, I worked in different agencies and hospitals. And
Hmm.
for the last 15 years, I've been in private practice as a psychotherapist. So it's quite a wonderful job. Like I'm very like happy to have it. It's a real blessing to be able to do that work too. It's sacred work. Um, but yeah, I just had the writing on the side for such a long time. But I kept doing creative things over the years. And then I went through a really difficult breakup about just over like, I don't know, 25 years ago. And
I
like
thought you were going to say a year
23,
ago.
23 years ago, something like that. I was in my late 20s. And when you're suddenly single and you need to find something to do with all your time. So I started looking for like courses to take. And one of the courses I took was a continuing ed course in writing the novel. And so I wrote the first chapter of my first novel in that course. And that's how it got really rolling. It was about like the year, I think it was 2000, something like that, 2001, that I started to write that novel. So not that.
I feel like it's a very common experience almost what you're relaying. Like all the authors, all the poets we've spoken to, you're an author and a poet. So whatever that may mean, like book, novel, poet, and then, all of them have gone through the same trajectory of like having another job and then also on the side writing, which is, I think it's insanity. Like it's total chaos.
Yeah.
Because I know right now writing my master's thesis is like, I can't. I have like zero time. And to have like you guys become not only like are you proficient at your job, you're proficient at becoming at writing, which is like a whole other skill set, writing, creative writing. And it's just incredible to me that every single person we've talked to has said exactly what you've said, but then you're doing it. It's like it's tangible. I see it happening, and it makes me so happy that I think the next generation can see you and your work and say, okay, I don't have to pursue this other thing that I have to also do and then do the other thing on the side. Like, I can just do that thing that I
Yeah.
love and like make a career of it.
Although,
And
the pragmatic auntie part of me will always say, find some other kind of job that doesn't eat up all of your writing brain,
mhm.
but will provide you some kind of income because, it can take a long time to make income from writing. I mean, some people
So
get very lucky, but I didn't.
no, no. So the funny thing is I actually worked in social work, but like more, working in nonprofit, grassroots activism. And then I came to writing as like a byproduct of activism, which is kind of, I mean, like it's weird to think about it that way, but a lot of activism relies heavily on writing, whether it's creative writing, reporting, whatever you're doing. And so I don't make a lot of money, but like it's like that's how I got to writing, was just because I was constantly trying to change things. And then I was like, all right, this works. This is the way to go about it for now. But yeah, like working in nonprofit, I think honestly, you're saying it doesn't drain a lot of energy, but being a psychotherapist or working in social work or working from what I feel like I had to deal with in nonprofit, was like it takes up so much
Oh,
mental
yeah.
energy, you know? Like,
It does, for sure, for sure. I just mean, like, I think it would be hard for me to have like an editing job and then get to my own writing. So, one of the things I was able to do, 5, 10 years ago, was when I moved into private practice, I was able to shift my hours so that I could just see
mhm.
clients in the afternoon, and then my writing happens in the morning, and it's a bit spacious, and I have like just room to think. And yeah, yeah.
So the hot topic question would be, what did your parents think about your writing? Have they read your stuff?
Yeah, well, my mom died when I was young, but my
Okay.
dad is very, like, he's a proud dad. And, he sometimes will call me up with a story idea, or, he will talk about this would make a great movie. Like, he's very optimistic about writing. But he's been very proud, and he's read everything. Even the books that I've said, like, maybe you don't want to read this one. Like my third novel, I said maybe you don't want to read this one, because it had a lot of sexy scenes in it, and I just wasn't sure if he'd want to read that. But he did. He's been game for it all, and he will buy many copies and tell his friends about it. And
Oh.
he's shown up to readings if they've been in the same town where he is. So yeah, it's been great.
And I think he asked a very good question. I kind of had the same question. Do you see your novel one day manifesting into a movie? Um, you
Cross
know?
fingers, right? That's the dream. That's the dream, to have, because these novels are really real. When you're writing, it feels so real in your own mind. The characters are real. I can see them for sure as films, and there has been a little bit of interest every so often where filmmakers will request a copy. So far, things haven't panned out. It's very expensive to make movies, but I would love that. I would really love that. And with my second novel and Seven, both of them became audiobooks. And, with an audiobook, with an actor or actors, reading the story, that's when you can really feel like it could be a movie, right? Because you have
Mhm.
actors putting their attention to your book.
We need all of our viewers who are watching this live to go to your most favorite director, go to their Instagram pages, and be sure to tag Farzana Doctor, DM. Let's just try to show some love and support for Farzana, because she has amazing works that I personally think would be phenomenal,
Oh, thank
phenomenal movies. And I haven't even read the books yet, but now I'm so intrigued. I was, me and Srishti were talking, and now I know that there is capability of having this in the audio style, that I'm definitely going to tap into it.
you.
Um, with that being said, speaking of audio, Srishti, would it be possible to maybe hear something from the book?
Yeah, I think Farzana had mentioned she might do a little reading for us, and we have enough time. We can still talk after you do your reading. So if you'd like to read something, yeah, let us know what it is.
Yeah, okay. I'll read a short excerpt that is like a minute long. It's just a little taste. So, as I mentioned, this is a story about a woman who goes to India on her marriage-saving trip, and this scene is happening just before they go to India. It's 2016, and this couple lives in New York City. In the evening, Murtaza and I meet on the couch for the married person's evening ritual, TV. Along with a nightly bowl of microwave popcorn, we've been putting away 2 episodes of The Mindy Project. Everyone, say The Mindy Project. Just that's the prayer. Anyway, okay. 2 episodes of The Mindy Project after Z is in bed. We guffaw and cringe in the same places. We are diasporic South Asian children of immigrants communing over the embarrassing life of a diasporic South Asian child of immigrants. While the credits roll, Mortaza leans over, kisses my neck, and says, "Shall we turn it off now or watch another episode?" "Sure, Murthy, we can turn it off," I say, sensing his preference. After all, it is Saturday and 9 p.m. I'd prefer to hit play, to be distracted by someone else's awkward world, but I appreciate my husband's good-natured and consistent initiative-taking. My friends and I talk about our lackluster sex lives and waning libidos, and I feel like I'm the lucky one amongst us. At least we can say we are still doing it, rather than being in couples therapy because we aren't, or breaking up because we aren't, or having extramarital affairs because we aren't.
Wow.
Wow, yeah. I feel like it's good for the older generation to read these things because I'm sure every relationship has its like flow, ebb and flow, right? So I feel like Indians, especially in South Asians, they sell this dream that you never really know what the end of that, what it may entail. And like, I was reading like, or I've been reading like Michelle Obama's book and Barack Obama. And so Michelle talks a lot about her relationship issues with Barack, like when he was, trying to run for president and senator, all these things that were happening and how they almost got divorced, and this is like the ideal couple we all are, looking at. And so I think putting like a South Asian lens on that, it's like even nicer to hear it from the cultural tones of like, what does it mean to like at some point in your relationship go through a process like that?
Yes, and it's not too much of a spoiler to say that she had an extramarital affair, an online affair, in a few years before this book starts, and that's sort of what she's alluding to. And yes,
Hmm.
I think every long-term relationship goes through its troubles, and probably what we really need to learn is how do we manage that, right? How do we move through conflict? How do we move
Yeah.
through trails?
Because Bollywood sells and all of the South Asian films will sell you this like unrealistic expectation. And I think, and a lot of times that story doesn't really finish. It's like for young people, or if it is for older people, it's like very niche. And so you're not really seeing like, what does it mean to be 40 and have been in a long-term marriage? Like, what does that mean? I think that's important for not for a kid to think about, but like in your 20s, like you're entering these relationships, like they're not going to stay static. They're not going to stay the same. So like, what does that mean over time? So it's wonderful that you're introducing that concept as like a starting point for your novel and talking about sex, because obviously that's something that in general we don't do enough. So,
Yes, yes.
And I was gonna say like that, like I just kind of think back to my family. Like I could never imagine my mom talking to her girlfriends
mm,
about her sex life, and yet I see this, mention of this, like our generation, or like the diaspora, like we are more open to talking about our sex life, which is something that I never grew up even imagining that my parents would do. And so just to kind of like see like, oh, 40-year-old women do talk about sex. I would have never guessed,
I would have never known. Yeah.
I kind of was like, I could see myself being that character. Like, that's how I felt about it. Like, I could see myself being that character because I do talk about sex, right? And, like, it is a topic that I think is relevant and, like, I would talk to my girlfriends about versus something that maybe I don't see my parents necessarily doing. I do have a question, though. For your character, is your character, like, an ABCD? Or like majority of her life she was here kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes, this character moved to the US with her family when she was 4.
Okay, gotcha. And is
So
that
that's
any
like
relation?
us. That's like us.
So that's ABCD, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah. And for you, Farzana, were you born and raised in this country, or were you came here when you were young?
I was born in Zambia. My parents spent 5 years in Zambia between India and Canada. And so I was born there, but came to Canada when I was a baby. So I was, essentially, I grew up here. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was
And I
gonna
think that's also, sorry, go ahead, Trish.
no, go. Finish your thought.
I was gonna say, like, a lot of people think, like, just because you're born and raised here, or you're like, ABCD or whatever, right? That you don't face these problems because your parents or whatever are very progressive, right? But I think Farzana brought up a very important point, that there were parents that would take their maybe ABCD kids to another country to get something done, or maybe they were happening here too, like she said, like 70s, this was covered by health insurance, right?
Hmm.
So I think that is something really important to also kind of mention, that just because you're in this other country, and just because you might have slightly progressive parents when it comes to certain choices, doesn't actually nullify the fact that there are still people who are experiencing this, and this
Hmm.
is a real subject topic too, right?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's important to know, because like how you want to think about Kutna or female genital cutting is that it is intergenerational trauma, right?
Hmm.
So and it's never talked about. So it happens to somebody, they're told never to talk about it, and they're also like kind of gaslit, right? They're told nothing really happened. It's nothing. Why are you crying? So
Mm.
then imagine you grow up and you become, you're now a young mom, and you've never really talked about this because no one talks about it. And then maybe your grandmother, your mother-in-law, your mother, or some elder woman says, okay, it's time to take your child for this. And you might have vivid memories of when it happened to you, or you might have zero memories that happens to, or you might have some kind of fuzzy, complicated, memory about it. And you might feel so confused. And so you're like, okay, the religious leader says we're supposed to do it, or my mother-in-law says we're supposed to do it. They're saying it's no big deal. It's just a custom. It's just a tradition.
Hmm.
Okay, I guess I'm going to do it, right? And then that's kind of how it happens. So that's why education has been such a big part
Hmm.
of the activist role, is to say, listen, this is what it was, because you might not even know what happened to your body, right?
Mm.
So,
and
many survivors don't even know what part of their body was cut. They don't
Mm.
know if it had an impact on their sex lives, because they don't know the difference,
Hmm.
right? They don't know, should it feel this way? Should it feel that way? So here we have the opportunity to say, this is what is cut. This is why it can damage things. These are what, 33% of women say that it has impacted their sex lives. 35% say they don't know.
Hmm.
So do you want your own child to potentially go through that? Some people say it has no impact on them because I don't know, maybe they're just so dissociative, or maybe nothing has impacted them. I don't know.
I
But
feel like there's no way to know, right? Like what you said, like it's so hard. How can you say nothing has happened when you don't know what the alternative would have been, right? So it's
right.
probably just a way to protect themselves, their family, and their culture is like it's like almost a
without
survival method. Hmm?
without going in like too much detail, because I was telling Srishti, like, I am very sensitive. So without going into too much detail, but in general, is this a very like invasive procedure, or like are there medical professionals actually? Is this like a surgery kind of thing? And this is my lack of
Yeah,
knowledge, but
yeah, no,
without
that's
again
fine.
going into too much detail, or is this like
No,
my cat getting neutered or something, where it's just like a little snip or something, and it's not very harmful? Like, can you give me a little feedback there?
yeah, yeah. So the vast majority of people talk about having gone to amateur cutters. So it's, some older woman in the community who does this.
Mm.
But there are some medical professionals who are doing it. And I think that's one of the ways that the pro FGC people have been able to rationalize it. See, now we're doing it safely. Now it's in hygienic conditions. See, no big deal. Um, but now there's a range of what happens. So I mentioned that our type is considered type 1. There are 4 types, and people can go and look at, if you go to like websites like the World Health Organization, you can look up the 4 types of FGM to get a clear sense of what's happening. So it's invasive in the sense that it's confusing, it's painful, and you're getting a lot of gaslighting about it. and it can impact depending on the cut, right? So this is a cut that's done under duress to a child, right? A child may have a freeze response, so they don't move at all, or they might have a fight or flight response, which means that they fight, they try to get away. So if you think about a very small person, their very small genitalia, and the cutter is trying to only cut the hood of the clitoris in our form. In other forms, much more is done. But if a child is under duress, we know that probably there's also damage done to other sensitive tissue, right? So that's how it happens. In some countries, like for example, in Indonesia, it's done shortly after birth. It's part of the birth package and it's all medicalized. But a lot of people,
it's like a circumcision that, like right here, they'll do circumcisions. But I feel like it's all under the pretense of like, why, right? Like, I think when you really go down to like, why is this, it doesn't matter if it's medically safe or if the reasoning behind it, I think, is more important than even the act of it, because that's taking away agency from a child and their sexuality and their gender. Like every element of that is stripped from a 7-year-old, which is not, it's just repressive, and it's just continuing perpetuating the cycle of like, women shouldn't be sexualized, you shouldn't have sexual pleasure, you shouldn't, in this culture, like you're just a childbearing like woman and that's your job. And that's how you, I mean, as much as we think we're like away from these antiquated ideologies, like that's really still how we talk about women. It's like, you're 30, you need to be married, you need to have children because your biological clock is over, and like you can't have sex for anything basically other than pleasure. That's like when, like I feel like my parents talk, funnily enough, my parents never, not that they're like conservative, like super conservative people or anything like that, but like obviously they were uncomfortable talking about sex because that's how they grew up, and so they never spoke to me about it. But now that I'm 30, it's like, oh, you need to have babies. Like that's their way of communicating. You should be thinking about that. And it's like, it's interesting because it's like such an indirect way of having that conversation with you, but basically that's what you're saying to me. So like all the ways of like diminishing women's power, I mean, I think that's the problem. And I'm so,
and even from a medical perspective, like I'm really questioning like ethics, right? Like I know like as a doctor, you have, certain responsibility where, ethics plays a huge role. And I think that's really, that's what struck me. Like I'm really confused by like, okay, even medical professionals are doing this, but like, isn't this kind of sort of possibly unethical? Like I'm not sure,
Yes. In most countries, it's even illegal in many countries. But yeah, the whole issue of bodily integrity, children's rights, like all of that, and then layer on top of that just the lack of sexual education that we have globally, right? You've mentioned that you go from 0 to now you have to have babies, and you don't own your body. It's not for you. Pleasure is not for you. So yeah, it's very unethical.
Well, I feel like it's under the umbrella of why they say, so that's why I asked you, what is the reasoning for this? Because I always wonder if there's like a pretense for what it is for, like the way that it's being sold. Because they claim that male circumcision is more for like the health of like the penis. And so, okay, like that means like medically it's like okay to snip that portion off of a kid's penis. That's fine, we can take off the foreskin. But I wonder, like, I still think that that's actually not very, like, I don't know if that's really a healthy practice. I think it comes from religious undertones that we don't acknowledge. I mean, I know that, I'm not saying I think that, sorry, I know that, but like for this, it's like very overtly seems like there's no real rationale for doing something like that. And as you know, your clit and like that area has the most nerve endings. So even if you're a kid, doesn't matter how old you are, whether or not your memory blocks it out of your brain, like I don't care if you think at the end of the day it didn't really hurt you. Like it's nerve endings that you're cutting off. Like there's no way that it's
And this
not
is
gonna.
not happening, if I understand correctly, this is not happening like under anesthesia or like we just going right in.
Yep,
Yeah.
quick. And, you know, just around male circumcision, there are many people who are now questioning that. They're questioning whether it's really required for health. They're also questioning the whole issue of, you know, bodily integrity and children's rights. And there was one study done where they took two sets of babies, boys who had been circumcised and not, and then they tested their pain sensitivity at their first vaccinations. And the kids who had been vaccinated had a huger response of pain to the vaccination. So, you know, even if this is happening at the newborn age versus at 7 or whenever, it's still going to have an impact on the body, and the body keeps the score for every kind of trauma, right?
That's true.
So
Your body, and then generationally too, like you said, like even if it's not trauma that you're experiencing yourself, like your generational trauma will like permeate through like your conversations, or like even just physically. I'm not really sure like how I haven't gone through that same process, but I'm sure it's there.
Yes.
I know that we're kind of getting to the end of our time because this will time us out at 1 hour. I have so many questions I'd love to talk to you about. But I just think that I know that your new book of poems is coming out. So I'd love for you to like tell us a little bit about that, and then close out with like where we can find you, how we can support you. And Yashu, if you have any ending comments to give, you can definitely do that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, my book of poetry is coming out May 22. And I just finished my last edits on it. It's called You Still Look the Same. And it's a kind of cobbling together of 10 years of poetry. I used to write poetry not having any clue what I was doing. I was just like getting my energy out. And over the last few years, I've been learning more about poetry and like, what makes something a poem? What makes something poetic? How do you put together a poetry collection? How do you make that make sense? You know, all these disparate poems. So You Still Look the Same. It's coming out in May. And what else?
Is there a theme?
Yeah, there's actually a few themes. There's 4 sections. And the first section is on loss and breakups. The second section is on finding yourself in complicated ways, including online dating. The third section is dealing with trauma, and the fourth section is on healing. And so it kind of that's how the poems move. And it's a very personal work, but with everything I infuse magic and fiction into it all. And how to find me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter just at Farzana Doctor. I'm on Facebook and everywhere else as well, but Instagram, since everyone's here on Instagram, Farzana Doctor. And yeah, you can see I've got a link tree if you want to see some of the articles and podcasts and all of that I've been part of.
Thank you so much, Farzana Doctor, for being here today. I absolutely love the name Farzana Doctor, and I'm curious to know, is your last name like Doctor? Like, is that really that's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's a colonized name. Like, I think way back we had some other name, but you know what happens over time when, you know.
Sounds like Doctor, or like maybe it was something like that, and then it just became Doctor.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what it was, but we think that someone just took a profession as the last name at some point.
Well, thank you so much, Farzana Doctor, for being here.
Thank you so much for your questions.
This has been like truly a eye-opening, you know, kind of conversation, just because it's brought about so many different things to light, like not even just because this is a, you know, this sensitive topic or something like that, but it really also made us think about practices all over the world, ethics. Like we're really starting to question these things, as well as, just even hearing about your other works. I think there's like a message that's so much deeper there than just, the overall topic or the fiction of it or whatnot. And even the poetry, like I was like, oh my God, these stages of life, like I'm going through that right now, so I'm excited, like I'm able to relate to, and I think that's so beautiful. And I absolutely love how relatable and realistic all of your work is, and we appreciate everything you're doing. And is there, because I know you're in activism, so if you can let us know, is there any way that we as viewers can support, whether it's your organizations, whether it's, spreading of your book? Like I said, audience, be sure to find your favorite director, tag Farzana Doctor in there. We got to make sure they make a movie out of these amazing, amazing works. But yes, let us know if there's any way we can support.
People should go follow We Speak Out, and you can find them on Instagram. And the other group to follow, if you're in Canada, is End FGM Canada. So yeah, just follow some of those groups, amplify their messages, share their messages. I think, that's the way that we break the taboo and the stigma around.
Yeah, definitely. And I lastly just want to say that I really love that your writing has this through line of your identity, your experience, and where you're coming from, because I think a lot of people get bogged down in like trying to extrapolate things from other people's experiences, and I personally not sure if I find that to be so useful. But I think, I can really tell that you're speaking from a space of knowledge of like, your community, what you know, and what you know to be true about the way that you interact with the world. And I truly like, I love that feels authentic. It feels genuine to me versus like, like me writing about like a white person or something like where I don't really know that experience. I can't really speak to that, so thank you for what you're doing and for amplifying the message of your community and, all of the activism work you've been doing. I hope that we can review your next book or whatever you end up working on next.
Oh, I hope so.
We're always here. Yeah, of course.
I'll send the poetry collection in.
Definitely send it over to me. And for everybody else, we've had Farzana Doctor on. She's the author of 7. I'm here with my co-host Yashu, who is confidence coach and model and the owner of Air Studios. And then I am the managing editor of India Currents. Please follow all of us. Connect with Farzana Doctor if you're interested in her work. I'm sure she'd love to talk to you. And get ready for a cool live next week on Tuesday. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.